I was 21. It was 2017, and I was killing time at a gas station job I never planned on keeping. Minimum wage, late hours, and a register that jammed every other transaction. My co-workers were fine, the regulars were harmless, and most shifts passed without anything worth mentioning. I told myself I'd move on within a few months. Find something better. Figure out what came next. The day shifts were manageable. Annoying, sure, but manageable. Closing shifts were a different animal. The building felt almost aggressively bright after dark, like it was lit up specifically so everything outside could disappear into black. Every car that pulled in at 10 p.m. looked a little more unusual than it would have at noon. Every customer felt slightly off. You learn to dismiss that feeling pretty fast, or you burn out. That night, I was working the close alone. The store shut down at midnight. Somewhere between 9 and 10, the store phone rang. I grabbed it automatically, the way you do when you've done it 100 times. The voice on the other end stopped me cold. It was deep. Slow. Dragged out in this exaggerated way, like someone doing a villain impression from a bad horror movie. Ghostface from Scream was my immediate reference. It sounded rehearsed, almost theatrical, and yet it still crawled under my skin in a way I wasn't expecting. The voice asked whether I was in the store by myself. I paused for a second, then said something sarcastic. Something like, "Yeah, you got me." And I hung up. I was almost certain it was my friends. I pulled out my phone and texted the group chat, asked which one of them was calling the store pretending to be a serial killer. They laughed it off. One said he had no idea what I was talking about. Another said he was at home. Classic deflection if they wanted to keep the bit going. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same voice. This time it asked why I'd hung up. I gave another sarcastic response. "Alright, you got me again." The voice let out a laugh. Not the kind of laugh you'd expect from a prank. No energy in it, no triumph. Just a low, quiet exhale. Then it said, "I shouldn't be rude to someone who knows where I am." I hung up. But something about the way it said that sat in my chest like a cold stone. The phrasing was too specific. Too deliberate. I tried to shake it off. Customers were still coming in. Gas fill-ups, beer runs, scratch tickets, enough to keep me distracted for a while. The third call came around 10:40. The voice asked if the store always got this quiet so late. I didn't say a word. I just set the phone back down. Then I opened my group chat again and told my friends to knock it off, that it wasn't funny anymore. One by one, I messaged them individually. One was at his girlfriend's. One sent me a photo from his basement. Another was at a friend's place on the other side of town. That's when something shifted. None of them were lying in a way that felt coordinated. And the caller, whoever they were, had been referencing things that were actually happening inside my store in real time. Things they couldn't know unless they were watching. After the fifth or sixth call, I stopped answering. I just stare at the phone until it stopped ringing. A couple minutes later, it would start again. That loop went on for almost 15 minutes. I started watching the external cameras. The store was set back off a road that got quiet after dark, with a thin patch of woods running along one side and a dumpster alcove around the back. The cameras had decent coverage but poor night quality, grainy, patchy, with blind spots. I kept cycling through the feeds expecting to catch one of my friends crouched outside with a phone, laughing. Nothing. Then I started picking up sounds I couldn't explain. A tap somewhere along the wall. A slow scraping near the side of the building. Something shifting on the loose gravel behind the store. I texted the group chat again, seriously, stop, and even sent a picture of the empty store interior to prove I wasn't joking around anymore. One of my friends actually called me back on his cell. He sounded genuinely thrown off. He told me he wasn't involved and said to just lock the door early if I needed to. I didn't want to do that. Part of me still thought I was building a story out of nothing. At 11:40, the door opened and a man walked in. I heard it before I saw it, the door chime, and the sound made me flinch. He was maybe late 20s, early 30s. Nothing outwardly alarming. Clean enough, dressed normally, blank expression, no greeting. He walked the aisles slowly while I kept my eyes forward and watched him in the overhead monitors. He spent way too long in there for someone who had no intention of buying anything. He kept doubling back, stopping mid-aisle, repositioning. More than once, I caught the top of his face appearing just above the shelves, eyes tracking toward the counter. Not curious glances. Calculated ones. I kept rationalizing. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was stoned. Maybe he just couldn't decide what he wanted. He finally came to the register after 8 or 9 minutes and set down a single bag of chips. Still hadn't said a word. I hadn't either. I scanned the chips and reached for his change, and when I looked back up, he was staring directly at me. He held it for 2 full seconds. No expression. Just locked in. He looked away, paid, picked up the bag, and walked toward the exit. I remember telling myself, weird guy, rough night, it's nothing. But right as he reached the door, he stopped. He pushed it halfway open and then turned his head back, not his body, just his head, chin slightly down so his eyes had to lift to find mine. And he smiled. I can't explain that smile without sounding like I'm exaggerating. It looked like he knew exactly what he was doing. It looked intentional, practiced. Every hair on my body responded to it. He stepped outside. And instead of heading toward any of the pumps or toward a parked car, he walked directly to the side of the building. He held eye contact with me through the glass the entire time, still smiling, until the angle finally broke it. I ran to the camera monitors. I watched him round the corner and head toward the wooded side of the lot. And then he disappeared into the blind spot. He never came back out. I stood there watching the feeds for close to a minute. Then I locked the door early, 10 minutes before midnight, and sent a message to everyone I knew telling them a strange man had been outside and if I went quiet, something was wrong. I rushed through closing tasks, barely touched the cleaning, and kept my eyes on the monitors the whole time. At midnight, I grabbed my things and went to the front door. The few seconds it took to relock it from the outside were the worst of my night. Then I ran. My car was parked along the side of the building. I was almost there when I heard it, footsteps. Fast, but not running. Like someone power walking on pavement, their shoes hitting the ground hard and quick. I turned. He had come around the front corner of the building and was moving toward me, closing the distance fast. I got the door open, threw myself in, and had the engine running in seconds. I reversed out of that lot so hard my tires skidded. When I checked the mirror on my way out, he was standing in the middle of the lot under the lights, watching me go. The whole drive home, I sent voice messages to anyone who'd listen. The next morning, I told my manager everything. He pulled the footage later and told me the customer looked perfectly normal on camera and that I probably scared myself because of the phone calls. Said I might have connected things that had no connection. That response made me angrier than anything else that happened that night. I quit shortly after. I didn't debate it, didn't argue. I just told him if he thought that was normal, he could close up himself. To this day, I believe the caller and the man in the store were the same person. I can't prove it. But I know what I experienced, and I know I was right. My name is Cadence. These days I tend bar at a small dive about a mile off the highway. It's nothing fancy, worn stools, dim lighting, a jukebox that's been cycling the same playlist for a decade. Regulars know each other by first name. Passing truckers stop in for one drink and leave. The occasional tourist wanders in looking like they're not sure how they got there. I actually like it. The rhythm is steady. Tips are decent. And I've spent enough time behind that bar to read people pretty quickly, the talkers, the ones who want to be invisible, the lonely ones, the ones who are 2 drinks from becoming a problem. I work weeknights alone. No bar back, no second set of hands. It's slower and easier, but I miss having someone around. I noticed the man immediately when he walked in after 1 a.m. on a Tuesday. Late 40s, maybe, but polished in a way that didn't match the room. Black turtleneck under a dark trench coat, both fitted well. Clean hands, good posture, the rigid kind, not the anxious kind. He scanned the bar once before walking to a stool and sitting down like he'd already made his decision. He ordered top shelf without looking at the menu. Then he asked me, casually, if I liked working there. I told him I did. Made a small joke about bartending. He laughed, and it landed naturally. He talked for a while. Easy conversation, nothing that raised any flags. He had the kind of measured confidence that comes from never having to try too hard. The type of person who's used to being the most competent in the room without announcing it. After a while, he asked if I ever thought about doing something more. Something bigger. I gave him my standard smile and said I was happy for now. He nodded, sipped his drink. He looked, briefly, disappointed. Like I'd given the wrong answer to a question I hadn't realized was being asked. Then, out of nowhere, he asked what time I got off. I wasn't expecting that. He hadn't been flirtatious, not even slightly. So I was thrown when the conversation landed there. I gave a vague, non-committal answer and started wiping down the counter to redirect things. He didn't push. He just smiled, unhurried, like he already had what he came for, and laid a $100 bill on the bar. Flat, clean, like it cost him nothing. Then he walked out. I turned it over in my head the rest of the shift. It was strange, but not threatening. I figured I'd never see him again. A week later, he came back. And he brought someone with him. The woman caught my attention before she even sat down. Mid-30s, dressed in a way that felt slightly miscalculated, too trendy, like she'd studied the look rather than grown into it. She moved with deliberate ease, like every gesture had been rehearsed. She spoke before I even set down napkins. "You're so pretty." Her hand grazed my forearm as she said it, fingertips resting there a moment longer than the words required. I thanked her and kept moving, but something had already shifted in me. The man barely spoke. That alone was odd, he'd been talkative the last time. The woman asked me questions in rapid succession. How long I'd worked there. How old I was. Whether I ever got bored on quiet nights. I answered briefly, politely. I felt like I was filling out a form I hadn't agreed to complete. At one point, she glanced at him. No words passed between them, but something did. Then she leaned forward, lowered her voice, and told me she ran an exclusive events company. Private gatherings, she said. She was always looking for young women who were personable and confident. $10,000 for a weekend. I let out a short, flat laugh. Sounds too good to be true. She told me it was absolutely real. That plenty of girls like me had worked for them. That it was safe, exclusive, fun. She kept rotating through those same 3 words like a loop. Then she told me I should step outside, there was someone waiting who could explain the opportunity better. I didn't hesitate. "I'm good," I said. No smile. A group came through the front door right then, loud and laughing. The woman's face changed. Just for a second, the ease dropped out of it. She glanced at the man beside her. And then, without finishing their drinks, they left. I told my coworkers and my boss everything. We agreed to watch for them and report if they came back. My boss reminded me he was 15 minutes away and that the cameras covered most of the building. There wasn't much else to do. What they'd done wasn't technically illegal. I tried to move past it. A few nights later, I was walking to my car after closing. There was a vehicle parked across the street, engine off, no one visibly inside. I told myself it was nothing. I got in my car, pulled out, and checked my mirrors at the first light. The car was behind me. I made a turn. It followed. Made another. Still there. I took a random side street, still there. The calm I was trying to hold on to started breaking apart. I drove straight to a police station and pulled into the lot. The car accelerated and was gone. Nothing happened for a stretch after that. I almost started convincing myself it was over. Then, on a slow weeknight, barely a soul in the place, the door opened just before midnight. The woman walked in. I texted my boss immediately, phone under the bar. She approached slowly, sat down, folded her hands on the counter, and said, "Just thought I'd check in on you." I told her we were closing and she needed to leave. She made a disappointed face and asked for one drink. Just an old-fashioned. I decided to pour it, stall her, buy time for my boss to arrive. I turned to grab the ingredients. Then I heard it. The front door clicked shut. I spun around. She was gone. I walked toward the entrance and saw it through the glass, a dark van, idling in the lot directly outside. I locked the front door. Metal rattled from the back. Someone was working the handle. I grabbed a heavy cocktail shaker and dialed 911 with my other hand, already knowing the police wouldn't make it in time. I was calculating whether to run for the front exit when headlights swung into the lot. My boss. The rattling stopped. The van tore out of the lot. When he reviewed the security footage with the police, it was worse than I'd been prepared for. Two masked figures had been crouching just outside the front door when the woman left. A third had been at the back, forcing the handle, not trying to break in, but driving me toward the front, where the others were waiting. The plate my boss caught came back unregistered. There has been no resolution. The only thing that changed is that my boss stopped scheduling me alone. What still keeps me awake at night is the question I can't answer: how did they know I'd be working alone that night?